Welcome, everybody. This is Something Else with James David Dixon. I am your host, James David Dixon. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask a favor of you. If you like what you've been hearing, spread the word. Share this link with a friend. Leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify or Substack. Follow me on X at Down I-75. And whatever you do, subscribe because it helps greatly. I really appreciate you guys all taking the time and sharing a little bit of your life with me. Normally, I only do one podcast a week, but this is a special circumstance. I'm here today because Massachusetts needs a history intervention. Right about now, I feel like Vince Vaughn's character on Swingers. Massachusetts, you're so money, but you don't even know it. You're an original six state. You kicked off the American Revolution. You warned that the redcoats are coming. You're the reason we drink coffee in the morning rather than tea. But you're getting some very bad advice right about now. A toxic mix of white guilt and activist pressure has you on the brink of a history tilting, history erasing mistake. So today I've called you in to talk about where your flag came from and what's on it. Hopefully this helps you appreciate what you already have. And hopefully this helps you look differently at the people who urge change for the sake of change. It's no exaggeration to say that history is under attack. And it's not just in Massachusetts. We have the same problem here in Michigan. 5 years ago, Detroit's mayor, Mike Duggan, pulled down the bust of Christopher Columbus. He did this a month after George Floyd died in police custody in Minneapolis. And he did this to bow and to bend the knee to activist pressure from Black Lives Matter. In 2023, when Democrats held all the gavels in Lansing, a state rep from East Grand Rapids named Phil Skaggs had this bright idea. The state flag, which is based on a design by Governor Lewis Cass, should be changed. Let's get rid of the guy holding the gun that tamed Michigan's wilderness. Hell, let's take people out of the picture altogether and put in their place a deer, or a lighthouse, or a bunch of stars. There was no clear problem with the Michigan flag, and Democrats had no mandate for change. All they had was 2-seat majorities in the House and Senate. Furthermore, there was no clear vision on what the new flag should look like. All they had to offer was year zero communism. Erase the old and replace it with the new and the soulless. And that little game of replacement is the only way a meager talent like a Phil Skaggs would find himself in the same sentence with a giant like Lewis Cass, by tearing down Cass's Great Seal and replacing it with Photoshop. Mike Duggan is a bit more talented, but I'd say the same is true of him and Christopher Columbus. It's a constant theme on this podcast. Weak men make hard times. Same as it ever was. Fortunately for us, the Michigan Democrats couldn't agree on as much as a lunch order, let alone changing the flag that Lewis Cass, who by the way was a Democrat, created. So we dodged our bullet, but Massachusetts until very recently was running headlong toward theirs. Massachusetts is our 6th state. So why is it considering finalists to replace a flag that dates back to 1908? What if I told you that the elements of the flag actually date back to 1629, 150 years before America was a country? They say that tradition is the one thing you can't buy, but you damn sure can give it away. And my advice to our friends in the Bay State is don't. You see this flag here? If you're like most people, you think that the flag depicts the sword of Damocles hanging over the head of an Indian man, and that's why the Massachusetts flag needs to change. And you'd be 1000% wrong. The Indian here is a chief named Massasoit. He's been depicted in the seals of Massachusetts since the very beginning, dating back to 1629. In the original design, he wears a fig leaf. He looks like Adam and Eve did in the garden after they ate the forbidden fruit. In the modern version, he wears modern clothes, at least for a Native American. Massasoit carries a bow and arrow with him, but they're in separate hands. They're facing down. The man and his weapons are capable of violence, as all men are. And that thing above his head, what looks like a white man's arm carrying the sword of Damocles and wielding it, what if I told you it's not that at all? What if I told you he's a remnant? In 1775, Paul Revere engraved a new seal for Massachusetts. It depicts a Minuteman carrying a sword in one hand and the Magna Carta in the other. So here's the good news, guys. If Massachusetts wants a woke flag that displaces the white guy, it already has one. It's called the 1908 flag. The Massachusetts flag is actually a great marriage of two traditions: the Indians who were here before the beginning of America and the Englishmen who settled America. It's an achievement of humanity that both of these men could share a state, let alone a flag, and a mostly peaceful coexistence. But that's the problem here, isn't it? It's the same problem they had in Minnesota before they changed their state flag last year. Somehow, these flags depict men getting along peacefully and doing so without lectures from Barack Obama or Tim Walz or whatever activist is trying to make a name for themselves. These flags commit a great sin. They depict men in a peace that was not negotiated by society's betters, the ones we've been told we need to lead us and guide us, the ones who are trying to pull pages out of the history book right now. What they prefer, our betters, is that we wipe out history in favor of year zero. Remove people from the flag altogether. Then you can never be accused of racism. How brilliant and how cowardly. To her credit, Governor Maura Healey looks like she's pumping the brakes on the process. She says the flag won't change anytime soon, and I hope so. But let's not forget how we got here. Let's not forget how we got to the brink of an historic mistake. Activists have wanted to change the Massachusetts flag for decades. They decided in March 2020, before COVID hit, at the 250th anniversary of the Boston Massacre, that the best way to honor Massachusetts history is to erase it. Nobody alive in 1629, white man or Indian, would say that the depiction of Massasoit was racist. Nobody would. That's a modern fiction, and it's told for the same reason most modern accusations of racism are made: to gain power for the accuser. But that's the problem of the activist, is myopia. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When accusing racism makes powerful people skitter away in fear, you get really good at doing it. But as we've seen here in just a few minutes, the charge of racism doesn't apply. Massasoit's being honored, not denigrated, and there is no sword of Damocles hanging over his head. It was a Republican governor and a man named Charlie Baker who took this flag process to the brink, trying to save his own skin politically. And it's the height of irony that it takes a Democrat woman, Maura Healey, that she's the only one with the balls and common sense to pump the brakes and say, let's think this through. You simply do not trade Massasoit and Paul Revere for a soulless, peopleless design that any teenager could make on Photoshop. Massachusetts is not Mississippi, which had really good reason to change its state flag in 2021. We have an entire word for the period before the Civil War called antebellum. The antebellum flag before the war was the magnolia tree. Adding the Confederate flag in was the act of Democrats with the taste of sour grapes in their mouth. Removing it and making Magnolia great again is a reminder that there's more to the Southern identity than 4 years of war and betrayal that ended with the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. To change the Massachusetts flag, though, is to adopt the activist mindset that Massachusetts might as well be Mississippi because white men ran the place. People who cannot and do not make these distinctions should not be trusted with our history. They cannot be our lodestar as we decide the symbols for our states. Symbols matter. Just ask Cracker Barrel. Massachusetts has a history its people should be proud of. Wiping away that history would be a grave mistake, not easily reversed. I found in life, being a journalist for almost 20 years now, the best thing to do with mistakes is don't make them in the first place. The Massachusetts flag is already great. It combines two proud traditions. It shows the uneasy peace between men who are armed but seek peace. And it has a great Latin motto: by the sword we seek peace, but only under liberty. It's the ruling of this history intervention that the Massachusetts flag needs to stay how it is, now and forevermore. By the sword we seek peace. What's so bad about that?